We start today on end of page 83 of God Speaks. In short, though God in the human state has gained full and complete consciousness, he is still not conscious of his limited energy of the subtle form, nor of his limited mind of the mental form. Much less is he aware or conscious of himself as the one indivisible, eternal, and infinite God with unbounded power and unlimited energy.
Knowledge.
Unlimited knowledge. Thank you. At this stage, God is only fully conscious of his identity with human form and its varied gross aspects and experiences in full only the gross world as an ordinary human being of the world in the form of man or woman. But the consciousness of man, together with his mental form as the mind, his subtle form as energy, and his gross form as the body, are all the outcome of the manifestation of the most finite nothing as infinite. As infinite nothingness, which was latent in the God is state. In other words, the limited mind, the limited energy, and the finite body are all of the nothing, and the consciousness of the limited mind, the limited energy, and the finite body is also of the nothing. In man, the mind is the seat of desires and thoughts. Energy is the seat of force and vigor, and the body, typifying happiness, is the seat of happiness and misery. Hence, these desires and thoughts, force and vigor, happiness and misery, are respectively the finite aspects of the limited mind, energy, and body of man. Although these aspects of the finite basis of the triple nature of man, the mind, the energy, and the body, which is typifying happiness, are finite due to the fact that they are the outcome of manifestation of the most finite nothing, yet these finite aspects of mind, energy, and body demonstrate their capabilities ad infinitum. This is because each of these finite bases of the triple nature of man, the energy, the mind, and the body, typifying happiness, is closely linked with and upheld by each of the three infinite bases of the trio nature of God, Satchidanand: infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss. The fact is that when the latent infinite trio nature of God is gradually manifested out of the gradual projection of the finite nothing, and when it simultaneously protrudes the projection of the finite nothing as nothingness manifested as infinitum, this very same infinite nature of God at this stage of manifestation becomes enmeshed in the apparent and false infinity of the nothingness, and thus gets itself expressed as the finite triple nature of man, with capabilities demonstrated ad infinitum. How one, the mind, the energy, and the body as the triple nature of man demonstrate their capabilities ad infinitum in illusion is clearly experienced one through the inventive mind of a scientist who finds no end to discoveries and inventions. Two, through the release of nuclear energy in illusion, which has reached a stage where it threatens with its own force of illusion to destroy the very nothingness out of which it emerged and evolved into such a terrific force. Three, through the body, typifying happiness, which, now keeping pace with the advanced progress of the evolution of the nothing, is infinitely urged to seek greater and greater happiness to such an extent that happiness actually becomes the very basis of the life of illusion.
Oh, sorry. Whoops.
The only reason, for such infinite demonstration in the field of nothingness, which is illusion, is because the basic finite triple nature of man, energy, mind, and happiness of nothingness, is upheld and stretched out ad infinitum by the basic infinitary nature of God, which is infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss of everything. Infinite power is unbounded and is never reduced nor exhausted, whereas finite energy, though linked with infinite power, is reduced and exhausted because it is only the outcome of the nothing manifested as the finite energy of nothingness. Infinite knowledge is eternal, uniform, and all pervading, and therefore is without a break in its continuity. The limited mind, however, though linked with infinite knowledge, is annihilated and made to vanish ultimately because it is the outcome of the nothing manifested as the finite mind of nothingness. Infinite bliss is bliss eternal and continual, and because it is perpetual, it is without any opposite aspects. Happiness, on the other hand, although linked with infinite bliss, is not perpetual, and therefore it has an opposite aspect of misery. This finite happiness vanishes, even though it is the very basis of the life of the human being, because life itself is transient. As the life of illusion is the outcome of the nothing manifested as the life of nothingness, this life must perish. Page 86. A stage is reached when man, in his travel to realize God, ultimately loses his basic finite triple nature that is body typifying happiness, energy, and mind, and realizes the basic infinite Terrio nature of bliss, power, and knowledge. In this state, man experiences that his nature is not the finite body, typifying happiness, but is infinite bliss, not the finite energy, but infinite power, and not the finite mind, but infinite knowledge. Thus, man loses his basic finite triple nature and realizes that his is the basic infinite Terrio nature of God. This means that the basic finite triple nature of man, which was upheld by the basic infinite Terrio nature of God, is unlinked from the basic infinite Terrio nature of God. Although the man loses his basic finite triple nature, the full consciousness that he gained in his travel is not lost, because full consciousness, once gained, is never lost, except in gross misuse of the powers of the fourth plane, as previously described. In this state, with consciousness intact and complete, the limited and finite body typifying happiness, the limited and finite energy, and the limited and finite mind are all totally unlinked from the unlimited and infinite bliss, power, and knowledge, respectively. This is the stage when man is fully conscious and yet no longer experiences the false finite nothingness as real and infinite. The body typifying happiness, energy, and mind, which were instrumental in giving the experience of the nothingness, no longer grip the consciousness of man with finite impressions. These are now unlinked and have simply vanished from the focus of the consciousness. They must vanish because they were of the finite nothing by nature, which literally means absolutely nothing.
Thank you, Mahu. Marian.
All right. And just hold on. And where do I begin? Okay. But before body, energy, and mind ultimately lose their grip over the consciousness of man, there is one predominant experience which he has in his everyday life, that of sleeping and waking each day. This fundamental experience in a normal man gives rise to three basic states in his everyday life. The first state is the sound sleep state, or the state of complete unconsciousness of the self in man. The second state is the dream state, or the semi-conscious or semi-awake state. The third state is the completely awake state, or the state of complete consciousness of the self in man as man. Now, man's cognizance is life in man, and man's life is made cognizant through the actions of man. Actions are generated by the impressions of man, and vice versa. These impressions of man are picked up and imprinted on the mind of man by actions. Impressions and actions are thus interdependent because impressions are fed by actions and actions are motivated by impressions. As said previously, the source of impressions is traced as far back as the latent nothing in the everything, which means God in the God is state. When the nothing first became manifested as nothingness in the shape of creation, the primal manifestation of the nothing gave rise to the first trace of consciousness in God. And hereupon, the first impression of nothingness manifested. This first impression procreated impressions with the evolution of consciousness. Accordingly, all impressions are of the nothing. And as nothing literally means nothing, these impressions are naturally nothing but mere impressions. But because it was through these very impressions of nothing that consciousness evolved fully and completely in man, the consciousness of man is closely linked with these impressions of nothing and makes man consciously experience this false nothing as everything and real. Impressions as such play a vital role in the life of man until such time as they are completely wiped away, relieving and freeing consciousness from experiencing the false nothing as everything and real. Consciousness, when relieved of all impressions, will no longer experience the false nothing as real, but it will experience reality as the unlimited self, that is, God. As long as impressions persist and continue to impress the consciousness of man, these impressions, activated and generated by the energy of man, are being constantly imprinted on the mind of man and are being retained or stored in his subconsciousness. Some of these impressions remain dormant in the subconsciousness of man for hours or days or years, and sometimes for lifetimes. But most of them get projected through the subconsciousness of man every moment of his life, while he experiences semi-conscious and fully conscious states, that is, the dream and awake states, respectively. When these impressions remain absolutely dormant, the man is in his sound sleep state. When these impressions begin to get projected from the subconsciousness of man, they are hazy in their initial stages, being in varied subsubtle forms molded out of the nothingness, and the man is said to be in a semi-conscious state, experiencing dreams through his subconsciousness. When these hazy impressions grow clear in their final or ripe stages of projection, the nothingness in subsubtle forms is experienced as gross forms, and the man is said to be in a fully conscious or awake state, experiencing the gross world through his full consciousness in a completely awake state. When the man wakes up, the projections of impressions of nothing manifest the same dream of nothingness more forcefully and realistically. In other words, the same dream is said to be at its height now in the awake state of man. Therefore, the awake state of man is the experiencing of that same hazy state of dreams. Only now they are experienced clearly, being at their height and in their fully ripe and final stages. The dream of a man is but a drama enacted by the projection of man's own dormant impressions. These impressions, when projected through man's subconsciousness, create things and creatures of the dream as sub-subtle forms. Man in the dream state not only becomes involved in the drama of his dreams and plays the roles of both the creator of that dream and of the hero in the drama of that dream, but in this drama, man also gets closely associated with the things and the creatures in their sub-subtle forms, which are of his own creation in his dream state. This creation of sub-subtle forms comes entirely as a result of the manifestation of man's own past and present impressions. Thus, man in his dream state associates subconsciously with forms in sub-subtle states. When recollected by a man in the awake state, these very forms which he has seen and associated with in the dream state remind him of his conscious associations with the gross forms as things, creatures, and beings associated with in his day-to-day life of the present, and link them with his connections and contacts established in his life of the immediate and sometimes distant past. But more often than not, a man also recollects in his conscious awake state that a particular gross form, whether of a thing, creature, or being, with which he closely associates, and which he actually seeks, reminds him of having witnessed that same object in his dream at some time in the past, either some days, months, or years ago. Thus, it actually happens that a form of the future, which he happened to witness in his dream of the past, reappears to the man as a gross form in his life associations of the present. After a lapse of time, the same object that the man was totally ignorant of ever having seen or contacted before in his lifetime appears to him now in the awake state, exactly as he had witnessed it before in his dream state. Experiences of a similar nature are also recorded in which a man witnesses certain incidents in his dreams years in advance of their actual occurrence. How is it possible for a man to witness in advance, in the drama of his dreams, such forms and incidents of futurity, when this drama of the dream is only the outcome of his past and present everyday life impressions?
Thank you, Marion. Ernie.
Is it really possible in the dream state of the present for one to come across and witness a certain object which is totally of the future, and to establish future associations with it in advance, yet all the while remain ignorant of the object until it is eventually contacted and consciously associated with in an awake state one day in the distant future. Even if such a thing be really possible, and if the future is being inadvertently probed by man in his dream, then from where does futurity spring into man's present? How could man living in the present through his own impressions of the past ever come to grips with futurity, even in a dream state, and associate in advance with impressions of future incidents and objects? What is it that endows man with the faculty of prescience? These very associations with future objects and incidents, though experienced inadvertently and unknowingly by man in the present, are automatically developed and are inevitably there by virtue of man's being the creator of the drama in his dream state. No sooner does man become the creator of the drama of his dream state through the projection of his dormant impressions than this very projection of his own dormant impressions reflects his past as if it were really his present. And man, finding himself involved in this drama, gets absorbed in his past while still maintaining his past to be his present. In this manner, although all the time remaining in the present, the man inadvertently and unknowingly continues to preserve his past, maintaining it to be his present. But when man continues to preserve his past, he, being at the same time the creator, also concurrently becomes the preserver of his own creation through his spontaneous associations with the objects in the drama of his dream state. These very associations, though inadvertently established, maintain the continuity of the drama and endow the creator with the role of the preserver as well. In every wee bit act of preservation of all that which has passed, man in his present, as the preserver of his past, inadvertently and unknowingly also simultaneously establishes the future and is very present by the very act of preserving his past as his present, which present had remained always as the future of the past. Take, for example, a man who finds himself living in the present of today and who looks upon yesterday as all of his past and tomorrow as all of his future. Now, as soon as this man asserts that he is living in the present of today, he inadvertently and unknowingly has preserved that past of yesterday, not only as the present of today, but also as the future of tomorrow, just by maintaining himself as alive today in the present. In every wee bit act of preserving that past of yesterday, while maintaining himself as living in the present of today, that man also inadvertently and unknowingly establishes in his present of today, this today as the future of yesterday. So it is that although the past and the future have their own stand, yet both of these are consistently and concurrently preserved only in the present. It is because of the present that both the past and the future find their point of fusion everlastingly in the present. In the eternity of existence, there is no time. There is no past and no future, only the everlasting present. Therefore, in eternity, nothing has ever happened and nothing will ever happen. Everything is happening in the unending now. If there is anything happening at all, because all that has apparently happened, all that is apparently happening, and all that will ever apparently happen in the illusory cosmic universe is all that which God has already dreamt the moment his own original infinite whim surged as, who am I? So really speaking, nothing has happened and nothing will ever happen.
Let's see what that asterisk has to say.
The gross, subtle, and mental spheres exist only in imagination. And so time and space exist only in imagination. Time, therefore, has no absolute value. And in each of the three spheres, it has purely relative values that are quite independent of each other. Thus, time on the gross sphere is independent of time on the subtle and mental spheres. Time on the subtle sphere is independent of time on the gross and mental spheres. And time on the mental sphere is independent of time on the gross and subtle spheres. A dream is nothing more than an experience of gross things by means of the subtle organs. And we have all been told how a long and intricate dream may take place in an impossibly brief moment in that imaginary time, which is measured by the movements of the hands on our wristwatch. Okay, I think it's the next, yeah. When man in his dream state associates with past, present, and even future forms, he simply invents the roles of creating association, then preserving that association, and eventually destroying that association, while all the time maintaining that he is the witness to all these in the present of his dream state. Of these very bases of the creation and preservation of all things, creatures and beings created and preserved, whether in the dream state or in the awake state, there hinges at every step in the present an inevitable destruction as the future of all things created and preserved. Anything that has its beginning must have its inevitable end, and all things created must inevitably be destroyed, however much such things be preserved. Anticipating futurity inadvertently or inadvertently as destruction. In the very act of preservation, man in the present automatically becomes the preserver of all things that he created in the past. Man becomes the preserver, being in the know of the future that consistently confronts him in the garb of unfailing destruction that awaits its inevitable turn as futurity. Of course, man himself is really not aware that he knows the future, but the very fact that he is the preserver shows that he must be anticipating the destruction. And as destruction belongs to the domain of futurity, the man, though not aware that he knows the future, is knowing it all the time, that he is engaged in playing the role of the preserver in the present.
Thanks, Ern. Anne Elizabeth.
Okay, and I think that word is futurity.
Oh, thank you.
In the very act of becoming the creator, preservation of all things created follows. And the creator, perforce, simultaneously has to play the role of the preserver. I'll just read that again. In the very act of becoming the creator, preservation of all things created follows, and the creator perforce simultaneously has to play the role of the preserver. Concurrently, in the very act of becoming the preserver, destruction of all things preserved is anticipated. Therefore, all things are advertently or inadvertently preserved, and the preserver, therefore, establishes in the present the future of all things created and preserved, anticipating the inevitable destruction. God, in his original, infinite, divine dream state, eternally plays the three roles of the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer simultaneously. When God is in the process of preserving his own infinite creation, he is already at the same time in the future. And having preserved what he created, which is past, the future is definitely established before him, even in his eternal present, which future will destroy what he created in the past and what he preserved in the present. Therefore, God, being omniscient and eternally of the present, knows of the past, which he eternally preserves as the present, and also at the same time, he constantly experiences in advance, in his eternal present, all that which is of the future.
A little
Similarly,
slower, please. A little slower, please, Elizabeth.
okay. Similarly, God in the man state as man inadvertently witnesses all the time in his dream state that which is also to be experienced in the future of his awake state. Man thus finds that he sometimes has prescience of things that come to pass after a lapse of time. To sum up, in the very act of creation, the acts of preservation and destruction are also present. So, by creating illusion, God, as it were, simultaneously preserves and destroys it. In reality, therefore, nothing is created that remains to be preserved and destroyed, because the created creation is of the nothing. And this nothing in reality means absolutely nothing in all respects. Though this nothing is indeed nothing at all, yet when it is said that the nothing is created by Brahma, preserved by Vishnu, and destroyed by Mahesh or Shiva, it is spoken of only in terms of the infinite illusion. That is, in terms of the infinite divine dream state of God related to the illusory universe, the Brahman. There's an asterisk. Brahman. Of the three aspects, creator, sustainer, and dissolver, sustainer is the most important because the present, which sustains the past and the future, is most important. Therefore, Parvartigar, Vishnu, the sustainer, is the most important aspect of God. In the eternity of reality, there is absolutely no such thing as creation, preservation, or destruction. Neither is there space, nor is there any scope for relativity. Much less could there ever be the correlated factors of time, such as the past, present, and future. In the eternity of reality, the one, infinite, eternal, all-pervading existence is. In short, when the consciousness of a man makes him experience the impressions of the nothing subconsciously, the man is said to be dreaming a dream. I have to get some water.
When the consciousness of the man causes him to experience more realistically the impressions of the same nothing full consciously, the man is said to be dreaming yet another dream into the dream. Or he is said to be dreaming into the dream a vacant dream, experiencing the nothing into nothing. Hence, it is said, most appropriately, that the world and its affairs are nothing into nothing, dream into dream. This means that God, in the man state, experiences the life of man as a vacant dream into the divine dream, which means creation. Or, in other words, the life of man is yet but another dream of God in the dreaming of his divine dream or the creation. Although God in the man state has gained full consciousness and falsely experiences the multifarious impressions of the false infinity of nothingness as the reality of the gross world, this full consciousness and these innumerable impressions are all absorbed or gulped in, while God in the man state passes away in the sound sleep state, indirectly asserting his original divine state of divine sound sleep. When God in the man state completely wakes up every day from his sound sleep state, the full consciousness which lay dormant during sound sleep and the multitude of impressions which had vanished, that is, out of sight and out of experience, in the sound sleep, are now all catapulted out to produce once again the false experiences of the finite nothing, manifesting as real and infinite nothingness. So we'll start again next week from here, the top of page 94.